Today we're talking about juking. This is the video to watch if you want that faker status level of dodging skill shots. You won't be getting hit even once if you can master these techniques. Being able to juke is going to help you a ton, but remember that you can't dodge auto attacks or other point and click style of abilities. Speaking of point and click, you know what you can point and click? That like button. And don't forget to intercept those new video notifications. That way you can keep you and your team one step ahead of the enemy. So how exactly do we get you to become a faker level dodger? Well, let's talk about the different types of dodges that there are first. There are prediction jukes and reaction jukes. First up, the prediction jukes. There are 4 different kinds, and I've named these myself, but I feel like they get the point across pretty well. There's a stutter step, the stop, the fake, and the hard fake juke. Let's break them down. Chances are that you probably already know what a stutter step juke is. This is mostly used when dodging AoE abilities because skill shots tend to travel in a line, and if you're gonna stutter step, it's a lot easier to get hit by them because you're gonna slow yourself down in the end. A stutter step juke is just moving in a different, usually the opposite direction that you were going in when you predict that an enemy is going to throw out their skill shot. Immediately after you move in that new direction, you switch back. This can throw off your opponent's timing and can then be comboed with other types of jukes for more effective dodging. Again, this juke is mostly used to dodge AoE abilities that are placed either in your way or are thrown directly at you, and is also effective at dodging slow-moving skill shots. You might see a lot of high-level players do this stutter stepping back and forth and just barely dodging some skill shots. It's a little bit of a blend between prediction and reaction. However, if you can master it, it's really effective. If you want to practice this, there's a little sort of drill that I learned actually from LL Stylish one day. What you want to do is go into a custom or a practice tool game. You could even do this in Fountain at the very start of your games, or even in lane if you have nothing else to do. If you practice it a bunch, you'll get really good at it pretty quickly. When you're practicing, you want to make sure that your character moves as little as possible from where you started. So you go up, down, to the left, and to the right of your character, and each time that you stop your mouse movement, you want to right click. If you can do this quickly enough that your character is constantly changing the direction they're facing without moving very far in any one given direction, that means you're doing it almost perfectly. This practice is to get you used to flicking behind your character in whatever direction you're moving and clicking quickly and then going back in a different direction. This is the stutter step. In reality, all you're doing is just changing the direction that your character moves and then swapping right back. This juke, in my opinion, is most useful for dodging hook champions. You can really mess with some people's heads if you do it right. They won't know where to throw their skill shot. One thing that you need to avoid though, if you're doing this stutter step, is don't do it too much. If you do this over and over again, what's gonna end up happening is that because you're changing the direction that you move, they're gonna run straight at you and catch up to you. And that is exactly what you don't want. They won't even need to land skill shots at that point. Again, this is one of the more mechanically difficult jukes to execute, and it's gonna take some practice to get it done right. Speaking of the right move, if you're trying to learn all the right moves for your favorite champion or maybe your favorite role, you should absolutely go check out our website. Why? Well, there are other challenger level content creators like myself, and we're all making content that's gonna be posted on there. We get to go way more in depth than we can here on YouTube, and we get to listen to you guys. If you want a guide for your favorite champion, then we can work on it. Soon, I'll be posting some guides on my favorite champion, Jax. Make sure that you guys let us know what you want to see next, and don't forget to check out our website in the description below. Next up is the stop juke. These are really easy to do. You only have to press the S key. However, they're really easy to get wrong. Stop jukes are like the little brothers of the stutter step juke. You use it at the same time, however, it can also be less effective. Why? Because sometimes stopping your movement is a really bad idea. Usually you don't want to do this when you're getting chased. You want to make the most out of your movement when you're getting chased. However, if you're in lane, say against an Ezreal who has a line skill shot that's pretty long range, you can use this to fake him out a little bit. If you look like you're gonna move around the minions and you just hit S at the right time before you do, he might throw out a skill shot anticipating that you're going to keep moving. It's all about making the call if you think your opponent is going to aim the skill shot at where you're going and not where you are. If you use a stop juke and your opponent was aiming at where you were, well, then they're going to nail you right on the head. However, if they were aiming at where you were going, well, then they're going to whiff like an auto-filled blitzcrank. It's a very simple but effective juke. Sometimes, people don't expect you to just act like an idiot and stand there. The stop juke even has a counterpart in high elo. It's basically just running in a straight line like you want to. Why? Because people always call the juke and they'll throw it a little bit left or a little bit right or maybe a bit behind them. And then when they walk in a straight line, they're like, wow, that was the dumbest thing possible that you could do, but it worked. Our next prediction juke is the fake. The fake and the hard fake are actually practiced in the same way as the stutter step. But getting back to the fake, let's talk about it. Let's say you're playing Syndra, and you're looking at a pike staring you dead in the eyes charging his hook. You start running back towards your tower because, well, you don't want to get hooked and killed, but then when you start getting close to your tower, there's two sides to it. You can either go left or you can go right. A fake is when you want to go to the left side of the tower, but you want your enemy to think that you're going to the right. You start by walking towards the left side and then switching to the right. Then, after you've sold that as a bait, you swap back to the left and your enemy should fire the skill shot towards the right. Obviously, this doesn't actually need to be done on top of a tower, it was just a really clear example that I can use, as there's two clear sides. You could do this anywhere. In the middle of the river, in the jungle, near some walls, anywhere you want, as long as you have two paths to choose from. You just gotta make sure that you make your enemy believe that you're going in the direction that you're faking. Of course, they can also call your bluff and throw it on the left side still, but usually it doesn't happen that often. So now let's talk about that hard fake. The hard fake is just a fake, but instead of switching, you keep going. It's that simple. You think your enemy's gonna throw that skill shot, and you just completely change directions and run in the other way. The best hard fakes look like your champion hit an invisible wall and are trying to walk around it. No hesitation, pick the direction, move. You might have seen some high elo players do this type of thing when walking towards their enemies. Maybe they're facing something like a Blitzcrank or a Thresh, and they go, oh, he's gonna throw the hook at me, and then they just instantly switch directions 90 degrees to the right or to the left and dodge the hook and keep running them down. If they were doing a regular fake, well, they would switch directions and then change it up again and go right back the way that they came. So those are the 4 different jukes for prediction. They're pretty simple, and they're all practiced the same way. The stutter step is probably the hardest one because it's the easiest to make mistakes on. So let's talk about reaction jukes. Now this might come as a bit of a surprise, but reaction jukes are exactly the same as prediction jukes. There are only 2 things that change. The first is when you do them, and the second is what champions you can do them against. You can't react to everything that every champion can throw out in this game. If you're kinda close to a pike, you might not be able to react to his Q animation and dodge that hook. But if you're farther away, oh, you definitely can. Reaction jukes are a bit less common because, well, they can't be used in every situation. The reason why they're kind of rare though is because they are much harder to do. The classic example of this is Morgana. She does that very obvious little spin with her character when she goes to throw out that Q, and you could see her wind up her arm. If you're good enough and have enough practice to recognize that specific animation, you can dodge it almost every time. It seems kinda simple when you talk about it, but it happens really quickly, and it is very difficult to pull off. Morgana Q is one of those notorious ones that's pretty slow, but it can be really hard to dodge some other skill shots like Ezreal Q. Another slow example is Nidalee Spear. She's a bit trickier because her spear throw kinda looks like her auto attack animation, but if there's nothing nearby her for her to auto attack, well, you know what's coming out. React to it, and choose one of your jukes, and dodge it. Again, it sounds really simple. It's like me just saying, just do it, dude, like come on, it's easy, but it's not that simple. It sounds like it, but in practice, it is pretty difficult. One of the things about reaction jukes that's very important though, is watching your opponent. We've spoken about this before when we've talked about laning. You want to be looking at your opponent in lane occasionally and not all the time. Why? Well, you want to focus on minions to make sure that you can last hit and you know what's happening in the lane with the wave. It also lets you set up trades and a bunch of other stuff that we've spoken about. When you're in lane though and trying to do those reaction jukes, usually you're reacting to it when you're not even directly looking at the enemy champion. This is okay though because you don't have to do it that often. Why? Well, you have some meat shields in lane right there. Your minions can soak up skill shots for you, and that's what you're supposed to use them for. However, there are a few cases where that's not an option, and that's why the last thing that we're going to talk about is wave clear aim skill shots. The reason why this doesn't matter outside of lane is because usually you're not worrying about a minion wave in the middle of a fight towards the late game. It definitely matters in the early and mid game, but not really so much after that. So what do I mean by wave clear aim skill shots? Well, perfect example, Xerath. He can check off all 3 things on the list that I'm going to talk about. Do you know what Xerath's Q is? If you don't, it's a line skill shot that can go through minions and it has a pretty big range. However, it has a very clear animation of him charging up the laser. A lot of the times, Xeraths will try to aim their Q so that they hit both the minions and you, so that they CS and poke you at the exact same time. You can avoid this by paying attention to the minions, seeing in the corner of your eye that he's doing that really obvious charge animation, and then angling away from them so he has to pick and choose. His Q line is pretty thin though, so you can react to him letting go of the charge and then instantly moving your character out of the way. The cool thing about his Q is that you can dodge it in every way that we've spoken about. If you're predicting him firing it, you can absolutely stutter step to get him to second guess where he's aiming the skill shot and cause him to miss you. You can even just stand still after moving in a straight line, and he might just predict wrong and throw it in front of you. On top of that, you can fake, move back and forth a little bit, and then pick the other direction and end up dodging the skill shot, and you can just completely change directions with a hard fake and cause him to miss. And if you're reacting, it applies too. You see him let go of the charge in his hands? Instantly, stutter step. You might end up dodging it. You might be able to stop Juke it too just by hitting S. He might think that you're gonna move. You get the point here. However, I should absolutely mention that Xerath's Q does happen kinda quick for characters who are slow moving in the early game. You might have to wait until you get boots to be able to do every single option. This is why you might read on guides that boots are very important against these kinds of champions like Xerath. It's also why laning against these long range sort of bullies can be difficult in the early game. You just don't have the movement speed to be able to apply every single juke that you've learned. Let's use the example of Xerath's W now. That is a skill shot that has a pretty big AoE. You have to predict to dodge it. It's one of the skill shots where it's just too big and too quick for you to be able to dodge it without some sort of mobility or really high movement speed. It's kind of limiting in that sense, and it's a skill shot that cuts off some of your options. And lastly, we're talking about Xerath's E. It's a really easy skill shot to see. It's the only other thing in his kit besides his auto attacks that he uses one hand for, except he very clearly points in the direction that he's throwing out the skill shot instead of swinging his arm around like he's trying to throw a baseball. This is something that you can absolutely react to. It has a long range, and once you notice that animation and start to get the hang of recognizing it, you can definitely react to it and step out of the way. However, it's one of those skill shots where it's kinda dangerous to predict because you might end up wasting time and letting him close the distance on you. Xerath is designed so that he can hit his W, which slows you, and if he gets the slow, it becomes really hard to dodge both his Q and his E. Xerath is a perfect champion to show why each juke can work. His Q can easily be predicted, but you can also react to it once you have high movement speed. His W can't be reacted to because it's so big, however, you can definitely predict it, and his E is really easy to react to, and predicting it can put you in a bad spot. If you can master all these kinds of jukes, you'll be hitting your highest tier in no time, I guarantee it. While I'm out here making promises, let me promise you guys that you can find something helpful on our website, GameLeap.com. And I'm not just talking about the stuff that I make. We have a bunch of challenger level players who have all made great content for the website. Whether it's champion specific or generic skills for every lane, we have something there for you. Like I mentioned earlier, I'll be posting Jax related content on the website soon, so make sure that you watch out for that. Don't forget to tell us what you want to see next, both on YouTube and on the website, and I'll be reading all the comments on this video to see what you guys want.